our September virtual tour for Friends of Wheeling, and we are here at the historic Blue Church. This church was originally St. Matthew's Episcopal, as you can see from the plaque above the door. Construction began in 1836, as the Roman numerals say, completed in 1837, so we date this to 1837. It's part of the Monroe Street East Historic District, which consists of the church, the 3 buildings across the street, and the 2 buildings just to the west. It became a historic district in 1979, and at that time the nomination told us that the structure was designed by a Wheeling house carpenter named James H. White and built by stonemason John Gilchrist and bricklayer Hiram Martin. It's in a classic temple form. It is brick covered with scored stucco. Even the columns are brick covered with stucco. There are 6 amazing towering Doric columns and a flight of sandstone steps that are currently covered with wood. We'll go to the interior in a little bit, but just a little bit more history first. During the Civil War, the rector at the time was a Reverend E.T. Perkins, and in 1861 he reportedly abandoned the church by night, even leaving his household goods behind, took his family to the security of Richmond. He later agreed to return to Wheeling if the vestry would permit him to omit prayers for the President of the United States. The vestry declined his offer, believing that Abraham Lincoln did indeed need the prayers of the congregation. Despite these controversies during the Civil War, the congregation grew to a point that it needed a larger building, and the current St. Matthew's Church was built at that time at the corner of 15th and Chaplain Street. Since then, the building served as the home of the House of Prayer for many, many years, and then the Church of God and Saints of Christ congregation. Now the building is owned by Wheeling Heritage and is for sale. Several structural repairs were done during the Wheeling Heritage tenure, including the roof and the roof trusses. It's definitely historically significant and would be, in my opinion, an ideal venue for small events such as a comedy club or chamber music or small theater type performances, as you'll see when we go on the inside. So we have with us Betsy Sweeney, who is with Wheeling Heritage, and she'll talk a little bit more about the exterior of the building, and then we'll move inside.
Good morning, everyone. So, as Jean said, we're standing in the Monroe Street East Historic District, which is a really special little spot in Wheeling. It's the smallest historic district here in Wheeling, and it is only comprised of these several buildings, but they sort of begin with the Blue Church, built in 1837, and progress through Wheeling's history through the significant periods of prosperity and growth. So we have 1837, we have the 1840s and 50s, we have post-Civil War industrialization and the prosperity and sort of built examples of that wealth, all within this little area with the latest building, dating to right around the 19-teens. So I always encourage people to sort of stand at this cross section of 12th and Byron and just take a little spin around and see each era of Wheeling's history from early settlement through the early part of the 20th century. The exterior, as Jean said, is brick coated in a stucco material to make this appear like the large stone temples that you would see in Greece or Rome. So everything that we're seeing is a classical element that has been revived and sort of recalibrated to suit the mid-1800s when this building was built. So if we come up here, down here, you can see a little window into the building materials of this structure. So this carved sandstone at the bottom is acting as the base of your column, and then in here where the stucco has started to peel away, you can see the brick that comprises not only the columns but the whole building. And this brick as you kind of look in, is a little bit dusty. It's really soft. You can see little rocks and pebbles in there that are inclusions. It's because these bricks were made by hand. The clay was dug locally. They would have been turned and turned, much like when you make pottery, put into a handmade wooden brick mold over and over and over again, likely by enslaved individuals, but not ultimately. And then all of those bricks would have been built into like a kiln type structure and fired, just like with pottery. And that structure is called a clamp. But these are some of the latest examples we'll see of that kind of brick manufacture before, as the industrial era is ushered in, we start to mechanize that process a little more. But in 1837, 1835, when these bricks were probably built, that was very much a hands-on process. One of the few examples of wheeling, so I really like to point that out. As Jean mentioned, the exterior stucco was struck to make this look like large blocks of stone, and it's hard to see as this plaster peels away, or it might be easier to see on the camera. There's a strike line here, one here, to give that appearance of big blocks. We'll go on in. These doors are not original, they were added later. As was this partition wall and this partition wall. And as we enter into the main space, we see that it's a large area, but it's not an enormous space. It would be, like Jean said, really great for a small music venue, a small performance venue, something where people could gather about, let's say, about 100 to 125 in here. The one big piece of the puzzle that is still missing is this proscenium arch. So, proscenium arch is just the arch that spans the stage, essentially. And while it is not going anywhere, it's not going to fall on me while I talk about it, it is spanning at a distance that is no longer considered safe by modern code and compliance. And so if someone were to purchase this building, this span would need to be reinforced, as would this balcony overhead. So right now, the balcony is sort of hung by the rafters, and someone that would purchase this building, if they decided to use this upstairs space, would either need to tie into the ribs of the dome, so all the pressure would kind of build in on itself, or you could support it from below. Those are the two big pieces of the puzzle that are missing to make this space usable for a public space again. Around the turn of the century, the ceiling had a decorative plaster and painted ceiling that is available. There's pictures of that on the library's website, but now it has a much later 20th century edition. The stained glass does not date to the same era as the building was built. It was added throughout the church's lifetime later, and you can see that we have here 1841 to 1895. This one was likely purchased in honor of G.E. Paisley. Over in the corner, there's one that says pastor. So likely the congregation purchased that stained glass window for the pastor. We did a lot of repairs to those stained glass windows in the 2014, 15, 16 time period. At AmeriCorps, Stephanie Wilson, who was a well-loved person in the preservation community, did a lot of those repairs. And then this window, this big obvious brick section here, that was actually cut away on purpose when the box gutters were repaired a few years ago. That allowed an access point to get to the space where the box gutter kind of lets into the building, fits into the building. So that's a good thing. We want that exposed so that we can do those repairs. And the next person that is ready to do something with this building could just re-plaster that, the rosettes and the plaster trim around the cornice up here, all that decorative stuff. Most of that was salvaged and is stacked to the side so that you could repair and replace when that went back up. Want to go upstairs? Also, the floor is slanted down towards the stage. This is dating likely like 1920s, 30s, and we believe that underneath here is a totally level original floor that runs to the front of the building. When this was in use, we had a kitchen and restrooms and some of these side areas. Oop, I'm going the wrong way. starts to look like the 1830s, 1840s again. This balcony space was likely used exclusively for the enslaved population in a larger church in a larger city. In the 1830s and 1840s, there were often galleries that were completely separate, walled off, and placed at the back of the sanctuaries for the enslaved population. But in a small growing city like Wheeling, just this upper gallery would have been sufficient because we had a much smaller population. But if we look over here, we can see some of those original pews. And this would have always been built to be a little slanted, so we're not falling into the off the balcony. It's okay. It needs to be reinforced, but not that badly. Over here, we can see this is one of the original pews. We have several that line the wall here, and it's just, there are very few things in Wheeling that are this old, and it's really incredible that this is still here, and to think of all the people that were seated up here. This one is in really good shape, still has this pretty detail and this blue nose on the seat, but if you go to this one down here, this one in its disrepair, you can see the cut nails coming out of the side. It's helping to date that thing. I venture to guess that if I won't, but if you popped this off, there would likely be a hand-wrought head on the other side of that nail because of the age, which is really special. It also gives us the opportunity to look at the stained glass up here. These sections here that are discolored, that just are a different color, are areas where bricks were replaced and repaired. So all that light colored mortar is the original, and then all of the grayer mortar is the replacement mortar. And I was looking to see, if you look at that brick, see the one that's all gray? Go one over, in that bottom right-hand corner, you can see what appears to be like some fingerprints or a paw print or something stepped on that brick or pressed into that brick when it was out in the field drying before it was baked. And that's something you can only see with a handmade brick.
Wow.
Other stuff up here, if this was to be, let's say, a music venue or a gallery or whatever, like I said, this gallery space, this balcony gallery, would need to be reinforced either from the ceiling or from below, and this handrail would have to be raised so that people don't just fall over. That's really about it up here. Oh, the extra rosettes, that's right. And over here we can take a close-up look of the pieces of plaster that were removed to do those repairs. We can see right here, they're actually really big, and they were cast into a mold, and then scored, and then basically pasted onto the wall.
Wow.
So it would not be difficult to recast more of these to fill in the places where they were damaged. Same with these, you can take a cast off of this, and then the rest of it is just a profile that gets run along the wall. So. The hard thing about these virtual tours is you can't take questions.
No, there isn't any.
Oh, good. Okay, well, if anybody has them.
John Smith says he loves the blue church.
Oh, we do too. And then up here, this is the access point into the roof area, and historically it would have been up to a bell tower, but the bell tower came down in the 19th century and was never replaced, which we see a lot in churches of this era. They would build these giant bell
there's
towers
the steps.
or
Ladder.
clock towers, and they just had a tendency to topple over for one reason or another. So it's common to see a lot of churches that no longer have them. And for most of this church's life, it didn't.
Was there ever an organ here? Someone asked me that.
No, I don't know. I would be very surprised, especially in the 20th century, if at some point there wasn't. But I doubt that in the 1830s and 40s, they would have had the funds or the means of the access. Some more handmade bricks. Some inclusions in here. They're not as strong as a modern machine-made brick, but they have great breathability. So when this is matched with its correct mortar, it just breathes really well and is able to self-regulate the building. And head on down. We'll make our way to the basement. This way.
Oh, Erica wants to know who currently owns it.
Wheeling Heritage is the current owner, and it is for sale and available for rehabilitation. So, if anybody is interested, Wheeling Heritage does want to see it go into the hands of someone with a plan and that is ready to honor the history. But with a lower purchase price comes all sorts of support and guidance through the process of rehabilitation. So we will be very happy to work with a future owner with historic tax credits, grant writing, and just general guidance.
And being in a historic district, a contributing structure, it is eligible for grant funding from the State Historic Preservation Office, and it's also eligible for both state and federal tax credits, which could make this much more affordable. And the phone number for Wheeling Heritage is 304-232-3087, and Betsy Sweeney would be glad to tell you more.
Yes, I'm glad you didn't ask me for the phone number because I still don't have it memorized. But yeah, we are available, and that, as Jean said, that tax credit would total up to about 45%. So if you're putting $1 million into this, $450,000 could be coming back to you, which is a big difference. So down here in the basement, sometime in the 20th century, this was definitely in use very often for gatherings, socials, things of that nature, and that's really the appearance of this space. So we have this beautiful tin ceiling that's still intact, that very, very likely was produced in Wheeling, just down the street, and installed in here. Really nice cast support beams as well. These are really pretty, especially with these little caps. And down here, it's pretty much a blank slate. In the back, there's some kitchen space. To our other side, there are restrooms. This is the Byron Street side of the building. There's a male and female, or 2 restrooms, however you decide to configure that. And then a bit of storage and more of the architectural salvage pieces that we've kept for reinstallation at a later date are in there.
The box gutters,
The
Yep.
Lego pieces that I don't.
yeah, the Lego pieces. Star. Oh, you can see the tin really good now.
Yeah, it's a really pretty pattern. It's a
Yes.
little finer than some of the ones that we see. It's just a little delicate. And I think that's really pretty.
Yeah. Okay.